This video is powered by the pros at Pascal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPascal.com.
We always enjoy our conversations with Tom Murphy, who now joins us. Tom, welcome in as always. Tommy asked me a good question earlier. The Razorbacks win tonight. Are they a lock for the NCAA tournament? I said yes. Do you agree?
Oh, wholeheartedly agree. In fact, at net ranking number 14, and this game is probably not going to move it very much whatsoever, and then they host a hot Kentucky team, which is number 20 in the net ranking. The only thing I would worry about was a blowout today, lose to Kentucky, and losing their first game in the SEC tournament. Then I'd be a little nervous. But I think they're going to play a very – I told you guys on Thursday that I felt Arkansas was going to have a fine game plan for Alabama. They were going to be in the game, and they were, and really had a shot to win it. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm not going to dismiss out of hand, don't worry about this, but I just think they're going to play a good game tonight, whether they win or lose. Nick Smith coming back, you just feel like they're kind of starting getting their roles. If they can avoid going through a big lull, like they did in the 5-6 minute stretch against Bama, then I think they're going to give themselves a chance to win, and same thing in the Kentucky game.
Here's where I'm coming from. I don't like going to Selection Sunday with an 8-10 conference record. That makes me a little bit nervous. And maybe you can go to Nashville and overcome that, but Tom, a win tonight obviously punches your resume one more notch on a road win, and a quality road win, but it also ensures you can't be below 500 in the league, and that's what worries me. If you have an 0-2 week, your conference record's 8-10. I don't know how many got in last year with losing conference records. I'm sure there are some. Maybe they didn't have net rankings at 14, but I just know that's one thing they can't hold over your head is if you have a below 500 record.
Exactly, and I know what you're saying, and that was kind of my thought like 2 or 3 weeks ago, but their net ranking kept going up, and when I hear that the Big 12 has all these bubble teams, and like a week ago Texas Tech was being thought of as creeping back into the conversation, there's some Big 12 teams that were like 5-10 maybe, or 6-9, that they thought, like I think West Virginia's in that mix, and there's several teams that were well below 500 in the Big 12 that they thought are going to make the tournament. And so if that's the case with a league like the Big 12, which, they won the Big 12 SEC Challenge, then why can't that be the same case in the SEC, where Arkansas is taking on a really strong schedule? They're going to take into account the injury situation when you lose Trevin Brazile, when you lose Nick Smith for 19 games. I just don't see how they fall that far in the net rankings. And in fact, if they're in the low 20s when this thing is all over, and they didn't make it, they'd be one of the biggest snubs out there because their net ranking is so good.
Tom, there's a difference between competing for an NCAA tournament spot and competing for a national championship. In my mind, there's only 3 teams that can do it: Alabama, Kentucky, and if Arkansas gets really, really hot. Who do you think could actually, from this conference, end up in Houston, Texas at the Final Four?
Well, that's a good question. Alabama clearly, when you look at all the weapons they have, inside, outside, they have guards who penetrate and put pressure on you. And Arkansas, sidebar here, Arkansas did a fantastic job of making their three-pointers a lot tougher, and thus they went 3 for 22. But what you give up, and Eric Musselman was quite, just honest about this. You can't do both. You can't really be tough on the 3-point and then keep them from driving into the lane. But they blocked a lot of shots. But you have to give Quinterly and Sears credit. In the second half, those guys got by their man and put pressure on the big men. And instead of dishing, they went to the hole a lot. And I can't count the number of high off the backboard layups Quinterly and Sears combined for. And Sears drew a lot of fouls too, but that's what makes Alabama so tough. But to get back to your question, some people would throw Tennessee in that mix. They're the number 3 team in the net rankings. In my view, they have some offensive flaws that they'll have to overcome. and they'll have to out-defend people in the tournament. And I'm sure Dane Bradshaw was a really good listen with you guys. I saw he was on the show earlier today. I bet he had some astute points for this game.
Yeah, he talked about certain guys that have been injured for the Vols that are game-time decisions for tonight. Josiah Jordan-James will be playing tonight. He's one of the linchpins for that Tennessee team. And the reason I didn't include Tennessee, Tom, is because of the nickname, regular season Rick. He has not gotten what many believe over the hump or gotten to where his teams have played regular season. Why? Why do you think that stigma has stayed with him, and why do you think Barnes hasn't gotten past what many believe are expectations in the postseason?
Yeah, Ty, that is a great question. And I know that the Durant team with Texas might have been one of the deepest runs they've made. Was that a Sweet 16 team? I don't have the entire Rick Barnes, chronology laid out in front of me. But when you think about Clemson, Providence, Texas, Tennessee, he's had some good teams. And he's a good coach. I mean, they're recruiting at a nice level at Tennessee. So I don't know what factors play into their tournament losses. I know they were upset a couple years ago. I cannot remember. Iowa, I want to say it was a Big Ten team that beat them. Purdue or somebody was a little bit of a stunning shocker to me. But who knows? One of these years they'll probably put together a run. But, I mean, you contrast that to Eric Musselman, who now has a short data set of NCAA tournaments, but has really excelled in them. And you think about him and you think, when do they make a Final Four run? And that's what makes them so dangerous. They could be an 8 seed, and the number one, if they win the 8-9 game, the number one would not like that matchup simply because of how dangerous they can be. If they were a really strong three-point shooting team, this Arkansas team could be a real hazard for somebody in the NCAA tournament.
I think this is a year we'd all say there's not a predominant number one in the country. Some would say Houston. Some would say Bama. If you're out west, maybe UCLA would be an answer. What should the tournament committee value this year when putting these 68 teams together, Tom? What do you think their data points or the criteria they'll look at that they'll value the most this year?
Well, that's a fine question, and has a lot of answers in my view. Obviously, overview, they want to try to keep the highest rated teams protected somewhat in their regions. So what do you do with Houston and Alabama? You split them apart. You got, UCLA is a potential. Purdue's dropped off a little bit, but, Kansas is coming up. They had some losses that really made me scratch my head, but yet I keep seeing them on a one line. So they'll probably be, a number one somewhere. But I think it's a little more open. Houston just doesn't have quite the recent history to say they're going to power through, but they have a great team, and Reggie Chaney is still on that team. But I'm not sure the answer, other than I think there's multiple teams that could wind up winning it all.
Tom Murphy with us here, Arkansas Democrat-Gazette and Whole Hog Sports. Tom, have you got a chance to watch any of the Southern Hoops parts yet on the SEC network?
Man, I have caught it in really small doses, like catching it in the middle of the shows, but I've happened to catch the Kentucky one. I don't know if it's all part of one show or not, but I've seen the Adolph Rupp segment of it a little bit. And, I was somewhat familiar years ago when John Pelfrey was hired at South Alabama, and I was working for the Mobile Register. I went to Paintsville, Kentucky, and I talked to his parents. I was in their home, did a nice feature on him, and I got a really good sense of what it meant, to the Kentucky fans, the history of that game, and how they cherished the nickname teams, Rupp's runs, and so on. And I want to watch the whole thing. I'm sure it's been fascinating, right?
Yeah, if you're a historian and you like the history, and part one starts all the way back in 1930 with Adolph Rupp coming to Kentucky and basically establishing that program. I thought one of the neater points of history is how Paul Bear Bryant called Adolph Rupp, got the recommendation for C.M. Newton, who was coaching there in the state of Kentucky. At a very small school, and that's how he ended up at Alabama and established that program. So there's a lot of history from the from the 30s and beyond, and a lot of it in the 50s and 60s that, is before my time, that I think just some really good context and background about, what makes this league what it is today, Tom.
Yeah, I'm sure it's really great viewing, and I will try to catch it. Maybe I could just record that thing. Thanks for reminding me. I might walk in and find the next showing and just record it.
Yeah, record the whole series.
It was definitely good. So, Tom, when you look at this week for Arkansas, 2 top 25 quad opponents, one on the road, one at home, and a chance to get above 500 in conference play. What is your confidence level based on what you've seen with this team that they have a chance to go 2-0 this week?
Well, it's hard to put a number on it. I mean, certainly there's a chance. The close calls they've had on the road. I mean, Missouri went into Tennessee and won. They shoot the three really well, and I think they did in that game. Arkansas is going to have to defend at a high level. They have to rebound with Tennessee, and Kentucky is going to come in here laying for Arkansas after what the Razorbacks did at Rupp a few weeks ago. We know the Wildcats are playing a whole lot better since then, a lot more confidence. Arkansas did some things in that game that really had Kentucky down. But that will be a very lively game, I'm certain. And so, I think anything between 2-0 and 0-2 is very achievable in any combination.
Tom, let's talk a little baseball because the Razorbacks went 2 of 3 over the weekend with Eastern Illinois. They got a midweek game on Wednesday. I got Wright State and Illinois State coming up. What was your thoughts on this last weekend as the Hogs had their first 3-game stand at Baum Walker?
Yeah, it looks like the middle of the order, Wegner, Borfin, and Slavin and Josenberger setting the table had been pretty hot. And they scored double-digit runs those first 2 games. Then they had a nice lead, and lo and behold, and you could tell Eastern Illinois had some quality hitters, the 2, 3, 4 holes, all good hitters. And then Gober hits 2 home runs on Sunday. And much like Will McIntyre had to find his arm slot on Saturday, I think guys like Zach Morris and Adcock, they need to, get their mechanics right. And then find some confidence because Arkansas is going to need them. I mean, the post game, you heard Dave Van Horn talking about how we trust about 4 or 5 pitchers. I mean, you got to get a lot deeper than that. And some of the freshmen like Gage Wood, who really impressed them, have not gotten out to great starts. And so some of those guys have got to find their way. And they talked about how deep their pitching staff is going to be. Well, they've got to start showing that. Otherwise, I mean, I do believe the run production will come back. Stovall jamming his finger didn't help, and it looks like he came back, and he might not be completely comfortable the way he's holding the bat, but they're going to find a way. That's what Dave Van Horn teams do. I plan to talk to Steve Holm, the Illinois State coach, here in just a little while, so you'll read some of his quotes tomorrow about the Illinois State game. Of course, everyone should remember Illinois State opened the season here last year with a 3-2 win, really held them down, and it was the first season opening loss since like 94. So, Dave Van Horn's going to be pointing that out to the team, I'm sure.
I'd forgotten about that. Well, Tom, we appreciate that last little tidbit as we wrap you up this morning. Again, you can find that in the latest edition of Whole Hog Sports in the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. Tom, appreciate it as always. We'll see what happens tonight in Knoxville.
Thanks, guys.
BetOnline remains your number one source for all your sports betting this season. Everything from the NFL and bowl season to esports. You'll find the latest odds, team matchup info, player news, and game trends at BetOnline. BetOnline features live betting, free contests, and live scores for almost any sport or game imaginable. We're the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite leagues and events. Head to betonline.ag to join and receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Make sure to use the promo code BELIEVE to receive your rewards. That's BLEAV. Bet Online, where the game starts.